up, you guys? It's Shekinah, aka the Purpose Therapist, and welcome to another episode of Journey to Joy. This series is all about trying to unpack all the different things that might be interrupting you and your opportunity to get your joy from the perspective of not just a therapist, but also like kind of sharing with you some of my own experiences in hopes that it'll help you kind of like understand what different steps might be necessary for you to get to where you want to be. So I'm hoping this helps, and let's get into it. So today we talked about relationships before, and we talked about the transition of those, but I kind of talked earlier about like, sometimes having to have this transition into the separation of different types of relationships. And honestly, this conversation came from a poll that I had in my Instagram post, just asking about friendships and people's how they maintain adult friendships. And so that's what this conversation is all about today. So what happens oftentimes, or what I've noticed for myself, at one point in my life, I was very like, it's either very black and white related to how my relationship should work. And what that meant was not really having a lot of room for people to grow, or a room for myself to grow. And then throw in the mix of when my feelings get hurt, or when I feel away, or when I felt disrespected, and it's a wrap after that. But then I started to really kind of transition that thinking, and I'm going to tell you what were some of the things that did that for me. So one of the biggest things it really impacted me was this book by Darius Daniels. It's called Relational Intelligence. And I also have heard this before by Lisa Nichols. She has a book as well called Abundance Now. And it's this concept that, we don't really own any of our friends or any of these relationships. These relationships are experiences, but then it's up to us to figure out where those relationships go. Sometimes as they transition, it can be really difficult to just say that it's not the same. Instead of saying it's just not the same, we like write the whole thing off. And instead of doing that, why don't we give it room for the change? We are fluctuating beings. We are changing all day, every day. Every day is an opportunity for us to be a different person. And if we have that same room for ourselves, why can't we give that room to other people? And that might look like really being able to objectively look at the situation and not take anything people are doing or saying personally in a way that is a detriment to the relationship, and just let it keep going and growing. So what does that look like in full concept? Well, we talked before about cognitive distortions, right? I wish you knew how often distorted thinking shows up and interrupts our relationships with people. So what do I mean? I mean, everything from personalization, everything that somebody's doing is a direct reflection of me, or my actions are a direct reflection onto that person. Not really. Half the time, a good 70, more like 75, 80% of the time, people not even studying you. You're doing these things and having these responses to what people are doing, and it's not even anything against you. Now, you do have these very like negative experiences you might have where people are intentionally trying to be vindictive and things like that. That's another conversation for another day. But this conversation right here is the time where they didn't answer the phone and now I'm offended, or the time where they didn't do this and now I'm offended, or the time, like, if you look for the fence, you'll find it all day, every day. So not taking things personally kind of like can give you room to let the other person really show you what really happened, or explain the situation later. Though that's one thing. Another thing that might come up sometimes is the idea that you should, or this relationship should look a certain way, or you trying to control what a relationship might look like. That's not really an ideal thing to look either. Those shoulds, that distortion of the shoulds, can interrupt the way you are allowing another person to just be, right? And that should truly be the goal, is that we're in partnership with people, friends with people, relationships with people where we can just show up and be, and they can show up and be, whatever capacity that means. And if our paths are aligning and connecting, that's awesome. But when they're not, okay. So then the question might come up like, okay, Shekinah, I hear you. That sounds all well and good. But what do I do when someone has hurt me? When I have been in this situation of extreme conflict, or when I have been in this space of disconnect, or when I haven't talked to somebody for however many years and things like that. So here's where those books I was talking about come into play. This idea of understanding and appreciating the experience and allowing people to kind of just change. You decide where that person goes. Darius Daniels, he refers to this point of the book where like you kind of not compartmentalize, but you kind of identify, almost like doing a relationship audit, figuring out where the people are, right, where they land, and then you deciding what that looks like. So let's say if you are at the center of a circle and there's almost like a target sign, there's different zones. At the center is you, zone 1, but the farthest out might be zone 5. You can identify for yourself what zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 look like and place people accordingly. Now, the beautiful thing about this concept is that if they were in zone 5, they can do something, or they can be an encounter where they end up in zone 1, vice versa. Zone 1 can end up in zone 5, but that doesn't mean that I have to cut you off and out of my life completely. It just means that there's a transition in this relationship. And I think that is something that is almost a freedom. You're not trying to hold this person hostage. You're not trying to put like, I gotta cut you off. We ain't cool no more. I gotta let you go. You're not doing any of those things. You're approaching the space with, number 1, grace. Number two, an understanding, true understanding, and you are redirecting your attention to yourself instead of focusing your behaviors, your habits, your traits on the other person, right? And so, conceptually, all the way through, that might look like these steps, right? You might ask yourself, number one, where does this person stand with me? You yourself, take some time, do an audit from 1 to 5, right? Identify what zone one, who are the people that are in zone one, and what are they showing you that makes them deserve that space? Who are the people that are in zone 5? What are they showing you that make them deserve that space, right? Then after you do that, operate accordingly. Release the control of trying to determine how they show up, what they're doing, what they're not doing, worrying about what the relationship will be in 5 to 10 years. Because the truth is, it could change at any moment. A bigger thing to this, and something that I've recognized that is like might be the way that I see things, it might be a little different. And if we're thinking about from a therapeutics perspective, those distortions play a huge part in how we manage our relationships. Other things like attachment styles can play a part of it. Your past trauma can play a part of it. Even those different experiences, negative experiences when in relationship, you overgeneralizing the situation can play a part of it. All those things are things you need to make sure that you're processing with yourself, your partner with a therapist to understand that too. But these can all be things that you're bringing to a relationship. So that's like from that therapeutic perspective. But even from personally, when you really think about the magnitude of like you only get one life, that person only gets one too, and you just don't ever know what could happen, what the situation might be. How much of it do you want to spend harboring hate and ill will towards a person? How much do you want to spend of it being frustrated with somebody every time you see them out, you feel away? How much of that time do you want to spend versus releasing it, putting them in a understanding where they're at and letting that be what it is, freeing yourself of the burden of trying to show up a certain way or do it because they're not gonna do this and because they did this to me. Who cares? You know what I mean? Life is too short, and you deserve the opportunity to live a full and unbothered life. That's not unbothered in the sense of like, I'm not pressed, I don't care about nobody, but unbothered in the sense that I'm redirecting all of that energy from the spaces of other people that seem to not appreciate it, and I'm redirecting that energy to myself. And anyone that comes in, I'm determining who deserves access to me fully and who doesn't. You have control over that. So I said all that to say this. I hope that in this space you're able to gather a couple of things. But number one, take inventory of where your relationships are right now, right? Take inventory. Number two, identify where are the spaces that you might be able to extend a little bit more grace, and identify the spaces that you do and do not have control over. How people act, you have no control over. And it's none of your business. Their opinions, their thoughts of you, any of that stuff, like it's none of your business anyway. You know what I mean? So if we understand that number one, I can decide where people get to go, and then outside of that, it's none of my business, it's out of my control. Then the third part can start to show up where you can really just intentionally be. You can be in those relationships that make you feel full and not spend as much time in the relationships that don't. You can be in the relationships that are pouring into you and not spending as much time in those relationships that don't have any reciprocity. It doesn't mean you love or care about the person any less. It's just that right now in this season of my life, I need something different. And I think if we were able to really kind of get to that point of objectivity in our relationships, then it'll show up a little bit differently. It might not be as much stress and much pressure when it comes down to the change, the ebbs and flows of our relationships, because the ebbs and flows would be something that we not only expect, but we leave room for, we leave grace for. That's a natural part of this ins and out. Now, again, when people are evil and vindictive and just being hurtful for no reason and things like that, that's another conversation. But this one right here, I'm talking about what does it look like what does sustainability look like in adult relationships? Is it possible? And I think that it is. I really think it is. Well, anyway, that's my little two-bit. Again, I'm Shekinah, aka the Purpose Therapist. I hope this was helpful to you. If you want to have these more conversations about relationships and friendships and things like that, hit me up. Let me know. We have a newsletter that's coming out related to this information, so make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.